As the years passed, the culture surrounding haunted hayrides and horror nights deepened, becoming more than seasonal events and evolving into reflections of society's relationship with fear. What began as moments of isolated thrill grew into a shared cultural phenomenon, shaping how communities understood themselves and how individuals confronted their own internal shadows. The people who returned year after year weren't just seeking screams, they were seeking connection, ritual, and something meaningful hidden beneath the Halloween lights. Every autumn, when the leaves turned ember red and the nights grew longer, a certain kind of electricity entered the air. People felt it in their bones, a strangely comforting anticipation, as though the season unlocked a part of the human psyche that remained dormant the rest of the year. This was the time when the boundaries between the real and the imagined softened. The familiar world transformed into a stage where anything could happen. Ordinary fields became haunted realms. City streets turned into apocalyptic nightmares. Barns, once quiet and peaceful, echoed with laughter, footsteps, and blood-curdling screams. In towns where hay rides were beloved traditions, the season felt almost sacred. Families prepared for weeks, painting props, repairing wagons, gathering volunteers, and crafting new stories to tell children who once rode the hay wagon now worked behind the scenes, learning the art of scaring from their elders. Grandparents shared tales from decades ago about the first time a hayride startled a whole wagon with nothing but a scarecrow's sudden turn. The tradition became a living thread weaving through generations, a gentle reminder that sometimes the simplest things, darkness, imagination, and a bit of mystery, can create the most unforgettable memories. For rural communities, these hayrides were more than attractions. They were a celebration of place. Each field had history. Each path had a story. Each rusting tractor, broken fence, or sagging barn carried memories of harvests, storms, and families who built their lives on the land. When the hayride wagons rolled through these spaces, guests weren't just entering a fictional world. They were stepping into the heart of a community's collective memory. That authenticity gave the hayrides a richness that no special effect could replicate, and visitors felt it. Even those who traveled from cities sensed the spirit of the land as they sat on the hay bales. The night seemed darker there. The stars glowed sharper. The air carried scents of soil, wood, and the distant whisper of harvests long past. Nature itself became part of the experience, a collaborator in the storytelling. The wind teased their ears. The cornfield swayed in hypnotic patterns. An owl hooted in the distance at precisely the wrong moment. Every natural sound became suspicious. Every movement in the shadows a possible threat. The line between staged scares and the real darkness of the countryside blurred, and people surrendered willingly to the unknown. Meanwhile, in bustling cities where horror nights reigned, the atmosphere was entirely different, but equally powerful. Here, the season brought spectacle, energy, and scale. Weeks before opening night, the construction began. Massive sets rose from the ground, haunted mansions with rotting balconies, cursed temples with glowing runes, broken-down carnivals echoing with ghostly laughter. Streets transformed into fog-filled corridors where creatures prowled and stories unfolded. Engineers installed lighting rigs that could turn a peaceful walkway into a nightmare with a single flick of a switch. Sound designers engineered screams, whispers, and monstrous roars with cinematic precision. Makeup artists spent hours sculpting faces that would haunt visitors' dreams. Costumes hung on racks like silent armies waiting for darkness to breathe life into them. Performers rehearsed every night, learning the choreography of fear. They studied timing, movement, breath control, and psychological pacing. They practiced silent approaches, sudden appearances, and the art of lingering just long enough to let dread settle in. Unlike the casual scares of Hayrides, Horror Nights relied on layered storytelling, plots woven through haunted houses, street zones, mazes, and even the themed food stands. The horror wasn't random. It was orchestrated, each scare timed to build tension and create emotional peaks throughout the night. Visitors who entered these events felt like they were leaving reality behind. At the moment the gates opened, the city disappeared, replaced entirely by a universe of shadows, monsters, and nightmares. The air pulsed with the scent of fog machines and autumn air. People from all walks of life stepped. Inside, thrill seekers, horror film fans, families with brave teenagers, couples clutching each other tightly, groups of friends daring one another to enter the most terrifying mazes. The energy was contagious. Fear became communal, laughter mixed with screams, and in a strange twist, the monsters became the hosts of one of the most joyful celebrations of the year. Inside the mazes, time lost meaning. Each turn of the hallway brought a new threat, each doorway a new dimension. Some mazes played with claustrophobia, narrow passages where visitors felt the walls closing in. Others manipulated light, flashing strobes that disoriented dim tunnels where shadows crawled across the ceiling, glowing corridors that hid figures in the fog. Some relied on psychological dread, whispers that followed guests, eerie nursery rhymes echoing from unseen children, or rooms designed to distort depth and perception. And then there were the jump scares, perfectly timed explosions of terror delivered by actors who moved with the precision of dancers and the intensity of predators. The screams echoed through the night, but they were joyful screams, the kind that released tension rather than create it. Because deep down, visitors knew they were conquering something, whether it was a fear of darkness, claustrophobia, the unknown, or simply the expectation of being scared. Each step forward became a tiny victory. This was the paradox of Horror Nights. People entered to lose control, but they left feeling empowered. Yet among all the lights, costumes, and special effects, something else fueled the success of these attractions: storytelling. At their core, haunted hayrides and Horror Nights were not about monsters. They were about stories. Humans have always used stories to explore their fears, to explain mysteries, and to make sense of the things they cannot control. These attractions offered modern audiences a way to step inside those stories, to experience them firsthand, to feel the beating heart of myth and fear from the inside out. Even the simplest hayride scene, a lonely scarecrow, a ghostly girl wandering the fields, a lantern swinging with no figure holding it, carried echoes of ancient archetypes. The abandoned farmhouse spoke to fears of isolation. The whispering fields evoked the terror of unseen forces. The sudden appearance of a masked figure symbolized the unpredictable nature of danger. In Horror Nights, entire story universes came alive. Forgotten carnivals cursed by tragedy, ghost towns frozen in time, secret laboratories where experiments had gone horribly wrong, haunted asylums where memories and madness blurred into one. These stories weren't designed only to scare. They allowed people to confront nightmares in symbolic form. As visitors left these attractions, something lingered in their minds, even as they laughed, even as they reviewed their favorite scares with friends, even as they ate late-night snacks still buzzing with adrenaline. Tiny fragments of the stories followed them. A corner of their imagination remained awake, A new curiosity emerged. Why did that scare feel so real? Why did the darkness feel alive? Why did a simple field or a fabricated haunted house stir such ancient fear? People would go home thinking about the creatures they encountered, the screams they released, the courage they didn't know they had. They realized that fear is not a weakness. It is a reminder of what it means to be human. And in the quiet hours of the night, long after the Hayrides stopped rolling and the horror nights shut their gates, the world felt strangely still. Those who lived near the attractions sometimes heard distant sounds carried by the wind, an echo of laughter, a faint scream, the rumble of a tractor heading back to the barn. The silence that followed was comforting, as though the land itself was resting after hosting thousands of wandering souls. Yet in that silence, something else stirred: anticipation, because everyone knew that this was not the end. The darkness would return next year. The monsters would rise again. The fields would whisper once more. The mazes would reopen their doors. New stories would be born, old legends reborn, new nightmares crafted from the shadows of imagination. Fear would return, not to harm, but to thrill, not to destroy, but to awaken, not to haunt, but to remind humanity of something essential, that beneath the layers of comfort and routine, people still hunger for mystery, still crave the unknown, still seek the thrill of dancing with the dark. As the popularity of haunted hayrides and horror nights surged, something remarkable began to happen. Fear itself became a celebration, not a celebration of darkness or despair, but a celebration of courage, creativity, and community. People who might never speak to strangers in their daily lives suddenly bonded while waiting in line, exchanging nervous jokes, guessing what horrors awaited them inside, or daring one another to sit at the edge of the hay wagon where the monsters always appeared. First, fear had a way of dissolving social walls, revealing a shared humanity underneath. It reminded people that deep down, everyone has a heartbeat that quickens at the sound of a sudden scream. But what truly transformed these haunted experiences into cultural rituals was the art behind them. The creators, those mysterious architects of fear, were not merely entertainers, they were craftsmen of emotion. They studied human psychology, exploring how light, sound, timing, and narrative could be woven into a tapestry of terror that felt both ancient and fresh. They understood that true fear was never about overwhelming the senses. It was about balance. Too many scares made the experience exhausting. Too few made it predictable. A perfect haunt was like a symphony, with rising tension, sudden crescendos, moments of silence, and a finale that left visitors breathless. Behind every haunted hayride, long before the first scream echoed through the night, there were months of planning. Volunteers and professionals alike walked the trail in daylight, imagining what it would look like beneath a moonlit sky. They tested lighting angles, experimented with fog patterns, and built scenes that would spring to life once darkness fell. Sometimes the land itself dictated the story. A bent tree branch might inspire a tale of a forest spirit. A forgotten well could become the center of a local ghost legend. A dilapidated barn might transform into a haunted slaughterhouse, an undead hideout, or a realm for witches who whisper secrets through broken windows. The builders worked with the land, not against it, allowing nature to shape the atmosphere in ways no set designer ever could. In city-based horror nights, however, the creative process resembled filmmaking on a massive scale. Writers constructed narratives months in advance, crafting characters, histories, and plot twists for each haunted maze. Engineers translated these stories into physical environments. Walls that shifted, rooms that disoriented, hallways designed to confuse even the bravest visitor. Sound designers composed eerie soundtracks, blending whispers, footsteps, thunder, and unearthly roars into an audio landscape that manipulated mood and expectation. Lighting specialists painted the darkness with flashes, glows, and shadows that revealed only what they wanted visitors to see. Makeup artists spent entire nights sculpting latex wounds, designing monstrous faces, and transforming ordinary people into creatures pulled straight from nightmares. Costume designers stitched torn fabrics, added fake blood, created clawed gloves, and made elaborate wardrobes for characters that would appear for only a few seconds before disappearing back into the fog. Every detail, no matter how small, contributed to the illusion. Yet even with all the artistry, haunted attractions possessed an unpredictable element that no amount of planning could control: the human reaction. People responded in wildly different ways. Some froze in fear. Some screamed at the slightest sound. Some laughed uncontrollably. Others sprinted through the mazes so fast that they missed half the scares. And then there were those who did the unexpected, standing still to examine a prop, talking to the monsters as though they were old friends, or applauding an actor for a particularly good scare. It was this unpredictability that fueled the performers, giving them fresh energy night after night. Actors in haunted attractions often described their work as exhilarating. They spoke of the thrill of watching someone's breath catch, the satisfaction of knowing a scare landed perfectly, and the strange joy of creating a moment that a visitor would remember for years. But the job was not without its challenges. Long hours, heavy makeup, cold weather, and the constant strain of staying in character tested their endurance. Yet they returned each season, drawn not only by passion, but by the unique family formed behind the scenes. Haunted attractions fostered a sense of community, unlike any other. Performers supported one another, shared techniques, exchanged stories, and built friendships that lasted long after the final night of the season. And then there were the more mysterious aspects that performers seldom discussed publicly, the unexplained moments that hinted at something beyond the theatrical, a costume that moved after the building was locked, footsteps in an empty maze, a cold breeze that brushed past actors inside a fully enclosed room, visitors swearing they saw someone that no staff member was playing, lights flickering in patterns that defied logic. These small mysteries added an extra layer of intrigue, as though the act of creating fear somehow summoned echoes from another realm. In rural hayrides, such moments were even more common. The darkness behaved strangely in wide open spaces. Voices carried in ways that defied explanation. Animals sometimes acted oddly on event nights. A horse might refuse to step near a certain tree. A dog might bark at an empty corner of the field. Actors stationed alone in distant parts of the trail often felt watched, sometimes by visitors, sometimes by something else. These stories spread quietly among workers, whispered with nervous laughter, but believed more deeply than anyone admitted, yet far from frightening the creators. These mysteries enriched the tradition. Fear, after all, thrives in the unknown. Haunted attractions at their core were invitations for the imagination to wander where logic would not follow. They gave people permission to rediscover the wonder and unease that ancient humans felt when the night was a thing alive. For visitors, the emotional spectrum inside these events was vast. Some came for the shock value. Others sought nostalgia, remembering childhood nights spent telling ghost stories by flashlight. Some arrived hoping to conquer their fears. Others simply wanted a break from reality, a momentary escape from stress, work, and the predictable rhythms of life. Fear demanded presence. It forced people to be fully engaged, fully aware, fully alive. And in a world that often numbed the senses, these attractions offered something rare, pure, unfiltered emotion. Couples found the perfect excuse to cling to one another. Friends discovered who the real scaredy-cat of the group was. Families created traditions that would be carried to future generations, and strangers bonded over shared screams, forming temporary alliances as they navigated the mazes, warning each other about lurking threats or encouraging hesitant guests to take the next step. The collective energy of these events became a kind of magic, something intangible, yet unmistakable. It filled the air like static electricity, making each night feel charged with possibility. The laughter after a scare was just as important as the scream before it. The relief after exiting a maze was just as powerful as the tension felt inside. The contrast between fear and safety, apprehension and joy, darkness and celebration created an emotional rhythm that captivated millions, and yet, at the center of it all, was something profoundly human: storytelling. From ancient campfires to modern horror nights, humanity had always used stories to understand fear. Haunted attractions simply allowed people to step into those stories, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. They transformed spectators into participants, guiding them through narratives that awakened deep-rooted instincts. It was this union of fear and storytelling that ensured haunted hayrides and horror nights would never fade with time. Technology might change, actors might come and go, sets might evolve, but the desire to step into the dark, to test one's courage, to feel the primal thrill of danger while knowing safety lies just beyond the exit. That desire would outlive generations, for as long as humans dream, for as long as shadows stretch across the land at dusk, for as long as the unknown whispers from the edges of perception, people will seek the thrill of the haunted night. As the night grows older and the last waves of visitors push deeper into the event grounds, something interesting happens. The experience becomes less about the scenes themselves and more about the atmosphere that surrounds them. Fear changes shape. In the early evening, terror is theatrical, bold, loud. But after midnight, fear becomes slower, quieter, almost philosophical. People begin to reflect not just on what frightened them, but why it frightened them. The darkness begins to feel thicker. The hayride paths seem longer. Every creak and rustle feels a little more deliberate. Horror nights become mirrors, ones that show us shadows inside ourselves we rarely acknowledge in daylight. The late-night ride is always the most revealing. By now, you've seen monsters, ghosts, screams, and illusions. But now, the hayride path is not trying to impress you. It's trying to unsettle you. The open field feels abandoned. The scare actors have thinned out. The fog looks like it's moving on its own, curling around your boots as if the ground itself is breathing. The tractor engine purrs slowly, and the wagon feels heavier than before, as though the darkness has climbed aboard with you. People stop laughing and lean closer together. The bravado fades. Now, fear feels personal. In this final stretch, every haunted hayride subtly plays on the same human instinct, the fear of what we cannot see. On-stage monsters can make you jump, but it is the invisible things, the rustling in the cornfield beside you, the shifting shadows behind the trees, the unseen footsteps circling the wagon, that truly make the heart tremble. The unknown is the purest form of fear. older than civilization, older than language, older even than fire. It is the fear that once kept our ancestors alive, and in these moments, surrounded by fields and forests, we return to that primal awareness, sensing danger in every whisper of the night.